Do you believe you will ever coach in the National Football League again?
I'm hopeful that I will. I'm very hopeful. But I understand the risks of filing a lawsuit like this. But I am hopeful that I will. It's something I'm passionate about. But if change comes, and if I never coach again and there's change, it'll be worth it.
That was a clip of Brian Flores on Get Up last week, who, if you don't know by now, is suing the NFL and 3 of its teams, the Broncos, Dolphins, and Giants, alleging a pattern of racist hiring practices by the league and racial discrimination during his interviews with the Broncos and Giants, as well as during his tenure with Miami. Yes, that's a lot because there's a lot going on. The lawsuit filed last week sought class action status and unspecified damages from the league and the 3 teams and unidentified individuals. Flores, who just so happens to be black, was fired last month by Miami after leading the Dolphins to a 24-25 record over 3 years and is coming off of a season where he won 8 of his last 9 games. To help unpack some of the cultural blowback we might see coming from this lawsuit, we want to bring in Justin Tinsley, senior writer with The Undefeated and Around the Horn contributor, to help sort this whole thing out. Justin, help us, please. Welcome to Takeline.
Whoop. Thank y'all so much for having me. It's a true honor and privilege to be here, and I hope I can provide something of substance for y'all on this.
Yes, you will, because I got questions. So, for instance, if you could look ahead 5 years ahead from now, how do you think this lawsuit will ultimately affect the culture of the NFL and its hiring practices? Because we know, like, the right now, things probably aren't going to change in the right now today. But do you see some optimism 5 years from now?
That's a really good question. And I think it's 2 ways to answer this. Now, how do I hope it impacts the NFL? I hope it impacts it in a positive way and it creates change that, really tangible, recognizable and impactful change. How do I think it's going to land? It's just, honestly, Renee, it's so hard. Like, the NFL is the biggest sports league in America. It runs itself. I think it's worth north of $10 billion a year at this point. And they are so powerful and they have so many layers of defense, no pun intended, of course, but they have so many layers of defense that you have to go through to even try to make an impact. So, I do believe Brian Flores, I do believe he's digging his heels in the dirt because I do believe he wants, and not wants, but he's intending for a long fight with the NFL. I don't think he's just like, all right, well, here's, a blank check, write what you want, and then just go away and don't say anything. I think he's doing it for the right reason. So 5 years from now, how do I think it's going to change? It really all depends on how far Brian Flores can take this lawsuit. But if they just get him stuck in litigation for the next God knows how many months, I don't know if any real verifiable change will happen. But I do hope this is, the cookie that starts to crumble. I hope this does lead to verifiable change. I hope.
We now have as many black head coaches in the NFL, which is 70+% black, as there are Supreme Court justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, which is crazy. Although with the hiring of Mike McDaniel, who identifies as biracial, that is, the calculus has changed quite a bit, but not significantly. Have we seen an acceptance that popularly that the Rooney Rule has failed? Like, I think more than ever, it seems like people understand that this really embarrassing rule that was put into place 20 years ago it's embarrassing that they needed this, right? In the first place. That is a joke that was necessary. But now we can, I think, get to a place where we can all admit that it has failed. Do you think that people have come to that?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think everyone understands. As you said, it's embarrassing that they had to put the rule in place to begin with. The rule saying, hey, you need to talk to people of color. You need to talk to black people and interview them for positions. And unfortunately, that rule was so bastardized and manipulated that, as Brian Flores is alleging, like, okay, we'll bring you in for an interview, but we already know who we want to hire. It's a sham interview, as he said. So I look at that and I know people understand, whether they want to admit it or not, everyone knows this rule is a sham and everyone understands that, nothing has changed in the NFL over the last 20 years in terms of hiring practices. In some cases, it just got worse. So yes, I do believe everyone understands that one, this rule needs to be abolished because, you know, these team owners and these team general managers and higher level management within the NFL, they were never going to abide by the sincerity and the authenticity that the rule was put in place for. So
it's interesting because they're not going to abide by those things, but can we all agree that NFL owners like to win, right? So it's interesting because NFL owners like to win, and they still must really wholeheartedly feel that all the candidates that they hire as head coaches, as in these positions of power that aren't minorities, but yet the minorities are 71% of the players. I'm trying to understand the connection to where, you know, the players can play the game, you know, the players can think the game at a high level, but where is the disconnect, even with the owners and the hiring process of these same players that played the game? Why can't they be those upper, because it's not that the teams don't want to win. I'm putting that out there so that people understand owners want to win. They must really feel that Black coaches or Black players that can graduate to become coaches and all these, why? Like, can you help me understand the disconnect? Where is it?
You know, I'm glad you brought this up because it kind of leads me into what I really want to say right now. It's just that here's what I think a lot of people are either failing to connect the dots on, don't want to connect the dots, or maybe just not even know that they should connect the dots. So we've been talking about this for years, but let's just put 2020 in focus right now, and in particular, George Floyd. And we heard the terms racial reckoning and holding a mirror to society, and, you know, all these things of that nature. Like all these things are connected. Like, we live in a housing market where, you know, racial discrimination lawsuits are on the rise. I read a report on CNN last year from the Committee for Better Banks that says Black people in the most powerful commercial banks in America have a hard time getting promoted to higher senior level leadership within these banks, whereas white people, you know, they get promoted at a much higher clip. That's Brian Flores' lawsuit in a nutshell. So when we talk about Brian Flores' lawsuit, when we talk about, you know, him trying to get a head coaching position in the NFL and other Black people trying to be in senior leadership positions in the NFL, it's because, yes, as you said, owners want to win, but owners want to win their way. Owners want to win in a way that's going to make them feel comfortable. And unfortunately, for a lot of owners in the NFL, and I believe this is probably true about the majority of sports. This is true about the majority of, like, big time corporations. Like, they want to win, but they want to win on their own dime. They want to win with a system that feels comfortable to them. So anything outside of that system may just feel like, oh no, I can't do that because I'm not comfortable doing that. And I want to win my way. So I feel that's how I feel. I can't say that's the root cause, but I feel very confident, you know, in that assertion and in that answer. So
that makes a lot of sense, I'll say.
I'm struck by, let's zoom out for a second. I think you did a really great job, I think, kind of outlining the shape and the years-long shape of this, the shape of this that goes back, I mean, to the beginning of this country. So the NFL released a statement in the wake of the lawsuit being filed, which said in part, and I'm going to paraphrase, that they are deeply committed to diversity. It's part of their core commitment. There are 30 plus 32, I think, you know, majority owners in the NFL. They are some of the most rich and powerful people in the country. When they care about something, when people of that ilk care about a thing and want something to happen, they just make it happen because they're rich and powerful and they could do it very easily. It's very easy for them. You know it when they care about something. Mm-hmm. It's wild to me that they can say we're committed to this, and yet the actual evidence on the ground does not exist. How can you jump from we're deeply committed to diversity as part of our core ethos to no evidence of that anywhere to be found? How is that leap possible? I don't know why I'm asking you, but it's just I can't stop thinking about it.
Fix it. Make it make sense.
I don't know.
It's hard to make it make sense because it doesn't make sense. But you mentioned that statement, and honestly, man, it's hard to see that statement for what it is. It's just words on a piece of paper that were sent out to all 32 teams. They were sent out to various media outlets. But, you know, again, it's just words on a piece of paper. And the main question I have is this, and we've had this conversation, again, to go back to 2020, we talk about Breonna Taylor, we talk about George Floyd. Like, how can you trust the police to police the police? just take out the police and put NFL. Like, how can you trust the NFL to police the NFL? Like, they won't do it. We're having this conversation in the midst of what I believe is one of the great NFL postseasons of all time. Like, all the games have been incredible.
Definitely.
I mean, that divisional round was the best weekend of football that I've seen in my life. And to be having this conversation, which is a very necessary conversation, it's like, this is just prototypical NFL. If we go back over the last decade, they've been way more reactive than proactive. We can go back to CTE and head injuries. We can go to the very serious discussions we had around domestic violence in the NFL. Colin Kaepernick. This is just more of the same. Like, this isn't some secret here. You know, it's not like being an NFL head coach is a secret position where, you know, nobody sees this person. Like, outside of the quarterback, is the most recognizable person on the football team in a lot of cases. So, like, we know these people are talented. We know Eric Bieniemy and Byron Leftwich have interviewed multiple times. And I saw the writer Howard Bryant post on Twitter. And it's like, people try to use their high-powered offenses in Tampa Bay and Kansas City against them, where it's just like, what has Josh McDaniels done without Tom Brady? Literally the greatest quarterback of all time. Like, they still get positioned. So, you know, like, this isn't some secret. Like, we knew this was happening. It's right here. So for them to release that statement, it's honestly disingenuous, and it's honestly a slap in the face for anybody that can think on their own. It's like, I look at it like this. One of my favorite comedians of all time is, of course, Richard Pryor. I think everybody loves Richard Pryor. And on his short-lived show, the Richard Pryor Show, used to come on NBC in 1977. One of the funniest skits was him playing the first Black president. And one of the questions asked at a press conference was, what is he going to do to get more Black quarterbacks in the NFL?
I plan not only to have lots of Black quarterbacks, but we're going to have Black coaches and Black owners of teams. As long as it's going to be football, going to be some Black in it somewhere. Right. Doing something big.
He was making a joke, but he really brought that conversation to America's couch. You know, like, you know, when people say like, oh, well, we need the Rooney Rule to do this. Like, no, you don't. Like, the Black candidates are out there. You just have to interview them. Bomani Jones said something the other day that I really, really agree with. Like, we have to stop saying create a pipeline for stuff like this, because when you say create a pipeline, it means like the people aren't there yet. We need to create the people. No, the people are right there. You just need to interview them. You need to give them this position of power that is a coach, and give them this position of power of leader of men in terms of in case of the NFL. For Roger Goodell to come out and release this statement, release this memo, it's kind of, again, it's disingenuous, it's a slap in the face. And honestly, it's unacceptable for him to release a statement like that, because you knew this issue was going on. You knew it was right there, but you did nothing about it until somebody, opened Pandora's box. And now here we are. And now this discussion is running in tandem with what should be a very, very exciting Super Bowl.
Takeline is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. We got Grizzlies and Hornets this week, and you know what that means. Ja versus LaMelo. Who do you like more? Who do you like less? It's up to you. Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest way to play fantasy sports. You know it by now, but maybe you need another reminder. If you sign up now with code TAKELINE, you'll double your first deposit up to $100 in free money when you make your first deposit of $10 or more. Deposit $10, you get $20. Deposit $20, you get $40. Deposit $100, you get another $100 free. That's how that works. With their slick mobile app, as slick as a dolphin's skin, and user-friendly website, you'll have no problem jumping right in and drafting your squad. So what are you waiting for? Sign up with code TAKELINE. Get your deposit match and play today.
I'm curious. Yeah, I couldn't have. Ooh, let me, in case you didn't hear, okay. In case you didn't hear, okay. I'm curious. What do you make of Bill Belichick in this whole thing? Like, what did he have to do with the whole, with anything going on? But like, what do you just make of that? Because I feel like this is a part of the problem as well.
Yeah.
Classic Brian mix-up by our guy Bill Belichick.
Like, I know. Imagine you being that person texting though. Like, imagine you're Bill for a second. Can you imagine? I would have been screaming in the house like, baby!
We've all, like, whether it was go back to high school and like, you accidentally pocket dial somebody.
Yeah.
And he's like, damn, I hope I didn't say anything that I shouldn't say. Like, we've all been in a situation where like, oh, damn, I replied all to that email. I meant to just reply to one person. Like, so we like when this Brian Flores lawsuit first became news, I couldn't believe the Bill Belichick angle of it. I'm like, is this real, or did like The Onion write this? You know what I mean? 'Cause nowadays it's kind of hard to. The lines are getting very blurred. Like that's how good The Onion is at their job. For the record, that's not a knock on them at all.
You don't know what's real and fake anymore, for real.
I'm like, wait a minute. He sent the wrong text. He sent the right text to the wrong Brian. Like, I'm like, wow. But like, when you read the text message, like when you see the screenshots, like you laugh and you say, wow. But then like you realize like the humanistic element of it. Like this is a guy, Brian Flores, who thought he was interviewing for a job, like on equal playing field. And then to find out from his former coach, Bill Belichick, like, oh, sorry, wrong Brian. And just to hear him say, thanks, Bill, at the end of that, like
that's terrible.
You felt the hurt in that.
Because you could feel the excitement as well when he was like, yeah, man, I really feel like I got a chance. And that was the part, it was like
that
the
hurt.
real excitement of, wow, I think I have a real opportunity where somebody's not going to pay me to lose opportunity. Like you could feel,
crazy, right?
You could feel that energy all the way to, like you said, the end when it was like, oh, thanks, Bill. It was just like
that hurt. That hurt because we've all been in a situation where, you know, we get our hopes up for something and then, you know, the rug is pulled out from underneath us. Like we understand that feeling. You know what that hurt feels like. And you don't wish that type of hurt on anybody, especially, you know, with something as major as a head football coach in the NFL. You know what I mean? And so that hurt because you got to wonder, like, how many other Black candidates have had that feeling like, oh man, I'm going to interview for the Vikings today. Like I'm going in, I'm gonna give it my best shot. I'm gonna interview well. And then
they don't know that they never stood a chance.
Man, they never stood a chance. They never stood a chance. And the NFL could be like, oh, this was just a one-off. This doesn't happen. Like, how do you know?
Come on. Yeah, come on.
All right, come on, man. Like I was born at night. I wasn't born last night. You know what I mean? Like
you mentioned the league being reactive. I think that's exactly right. And one of the things the league reacts to very strongly is this idea of disruptions, of anything that might penetrate the kind of like sanctity of the locker room or the way an organization is run in general. And I think part of that is, and what's central to this, is that for whatever reason, GMs, owners view Black head coaches, even Black coordinators, as riskier propositions than their white counterparts, right? And I think that plays into it with Flores's experience in being alleged. He alleges that he was asked to tank games, that he was offered $100,000 bounty per game if he would lose this, and then has talked about how, you know, as a Black head coach, that would hit differently on his resume than perhaps some of his white colleagues. Why is that? Why do the people who run organizations feel that Black coordinators, Black head coaches are inherently riskier than their white counterparts? What is that?
I mean, I think that's just really indicative of like society's viewpoint of the Black body. Like a lot of people feel like Black people aren't smart enough to do that job. And, you know, sometimes when these organizations hire a Black coach, sometimes I do wonder if it's for them to just to pat themselves on the back. Like, oh, look, I hired a Black guy. You know what I mean? Look at me. I'm progressive. I hired a Black guy. Like, I struggle to understand or know the depths of the sincerity of them hiring a candidate of color, in particular a Black candidate, because we've seen the history. We've seen the text messages. We know what exists. And I think this is just indicative of, you know, NFL owners, like you said, billionaires, some of the most powerful people in America, and they have their biases. And in a lot of cases, I believe it's racial. I mean, it's hard not to think otherwise, you know, like as Renee said this when we kicked everything off, like 71% of the league are people of color, Black people. You know what I mean? And so, you know, they're good enough to put on the field and run into each other and, you know, honestly risk their lives and health every single play. They're good enough to perform at halftime, which is another issue altogether. They're good enough to do this. But the moment Black people start saying like, hey, I want to advance up the corporate ranks. I want to be a GM of a team. You know, I want to be the head coach of a team. Then it's like, whoa. Like, you're good enough to do all this. But the moment you start asking for power, because that's what this is all about. It's about power. And once you, these owners and these front offices, they don't want to relinquish that power because that power is intoxicating, man. And if you're going to give power to somebody, you're going to give it to somebody. You're going to feel more comfortable in giving it to somebody who looks like you, who has the same viewpoint on society as you. You start giving it to a person who doesn't look like you, in particular, for the sake of this conversation, a Black person, then it's, you know, they can't wrap their brains around it. It's like you said, a riskier move. Like, how is this a riskier move? Like,
and it's proven.
Like, it's proven. Like, no.
Mike Tomlin. What about Mike Tomlin? Does anybody care about? Didn't he just break a record recently about being amazing and being a coach? And he just so happens to be Black.
It was crazy, Renee. Like, he's been coaching the Steelers for 15 years. He won a Super Bowl in, I believe, 2009 when the Steelers beat the Cardinals. I believe. Yes. So he did that. He's never had a losing season. The worst he's ever been is 500. And, you know, that's the standard for a Black coach. Like, you basically have to be perfect. Like, we've seen it. Like, again, what has Josh McDaniels done to warrant another coaching position over Eric Bieniemy or Byron Leftwich, who have orchestrated two of the most powerful offenses we've seen in NFL history? Like, what have they done? Well, like, what has he done over them? So you can't help but ask these questions. So, and it's just so much of America doesn't believe Black people are smart enough to hold these positions. Just to be frank, like, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. That's what it is.
Crazy.
His name is Justin Tinsley. He's a senior writer with The Undefeated and a contributor to Around the Horn. Justin, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for having me.